Thank you. So I'm creative director at Design Studio, and I'm just going to be talking you through kind of the process that we went through. So we started working with the Premier League last August when we got a call, and it almost seemed like a bit of a joke that someone was calling us saying, would you like to pitch to rebrand the Premier League? So everyone in the studio was kind of like a little bit in disbelief that there was this opportunity to rebrand something so famous that so many people in the studio had grown up with and kind of idolized the footballers and the clubs that they kind of stood for. So not only did we get to pitch for the Premier League, we won that pitch. So again, we were just kind of ecstatic. They didn't actually give us the trophy on day one, unfortunately, but later on they trusted us a little bit more and kind of like allowed us to have it in the studio for a short period of time. So we were all kind of like, this photo doesn't really convey it, but we were extremely excited and energized to be working on that. I think this is after a lot of hard work, this photo, but we were kind of really excited to be working on something so kind of epic. But then also, it's kind of very daunting to be working on something that was going to be seen by billions of fans all around the world. So, as with every project that we kind of work on, the first thing we do is kind of immerse ourselves into the world of our client. So actually, this wasn't the first thing we did, playing football, but we actually interviewed people across the whole business. So everyone from the CEO in the company all the way through down to people who worked on the kind of in the grounds and in the community working with the development of talent. So we also audited like thousands of sports leagues and looked at all the logos associated around sports. So there was kind of a huge amount of research that went in before we even started even thinking about what this would actually mean. So there are a few key reasons that the Premier League actually needed to rebrand, and one of the key ones was Barclays were actually stepping away as sponsor, so for a variety of reasons they decided that they no longer wanted to sponsor the Premier League. So this was a fantastic opportunity for the Premier League. It was the first time in 25 years that they could actually own the brand themselves, and everyone had known the Premier League as the Barclays Premier League, so this was the opportunity for them to really take ownership of and take the ownership back to themselves and build some equity in it. So the second key challenge that the identity needed to address and the brand needed to address was kind of all the negative things that come around and are associated with the Premier League. So people talk about the best players in the world playing in the Premier League, but they also talk about few of them are English. They talk about the best clubs in the world, but they charge too much for tickets. So one of the key things that we really needed to do with this piece of work was understand how we could change perceptions, because the Premier League is actually doing fantastic things and has been doing fantastic things in the community, even abroad as well. So it's built over 500 artificial pitches in the UK. It supports coaching for in every school in the UK, and it also does things abroad. So it's like helping with training camps in refugee camps and really kind of promoting football as a positive force throughout the world. So what we needed to do was create something that would allow the Premier League to talk about all these great things. Because one of the things that the brand looked like this. So it was very blue, cold, felt very corporate, and there was no kind of flexibility. So if they were talking to a corporate sponsor or they were talking to a child who was just getting into football, everything looked the same. So what they needed was something that with like great flexibility. So after auditing kind of where they stood, we kind of, and looking at all the research and immersion stuff we had gone through, we kind of came to an idea of how we could achieve this. So I'm going to play you a very short film, which is kind of like a small cut of the film that kind of sums up that creative idea. So this was kind of a very emotive way that we could get to the shorthand of what the idea that we came to was, which was we all make it. So it was about telling stories, and telling stories from the perspective of not just the players, but everything that happened off the pitch as well. So everything from the coaches, the coaching they do in the community, all the way through to the things they're doing abroad, bringing football to places where they necessarily see that as a really positive force. So we centered the kind of core idea around this idea of we all make it. So from this, then we needed to think, what does this look like visually? So again, we came back to some of the research that we'd gone through. We'd kind of spoke to, I think, over 1,000 fans in a survey, and 90% of them said that they associated the Lion with the Premier League. So obviously this was like a good place to start. But we needed to kind of fully understand what a lion means in society. So we spoke to a human animal studies professor at Roehampton, and he kind of guided us as to what lions mean in society and all the kind of semiotics around that. So the feedback was kind of overwhelmingly positive around lions. They're the only non-solitary big cats. They work as a team when they're hunting. So there's a lot of things that we could bring back as like positive cues that really fit with what the Premier League's about. We also looked at the existing logo, and kind of this is kind of a heat map of what you look at when you first see the logo. So immediately, most people are drawn to around the face, and we thought that's really interesting that the lion's head, where it communicates, is kind of the key focus. So what we wanted to do was simplify what it had at the moment and move it back to being just about kind of the head and the kind of emotions that you could convey through that. So as you saw before, we had the trophy in the studio, so we looked for inspiration and kind of the shapes and the elements that were existing in the trophy. And then we started to sketch what that could start to look like. We were looking at how far we could simplify it. And this was just a few things that, a few sketches of the things that we started to look at. The key thing was we started to look at changing the perspective. So before, the lion was looking straight at you, which felt quite confrontational. So we were looking for something that felt more kind of emotive, uplifting, with a sense of pride, and kind of looking away into the future. So we'd done, by this time, I think this was, we'd done a lot of work. And then we got to, I think it was December, and the Premier League, we'd developed all of the identity, everything was signed off, and we were like, this is great, it's all been signed off, we can like start to kind of implement this and see this in the real world. And then on the 12th of January, the story leaked that the Premier League was rebranding. It wasn't due to launch until in the summer, and there was just suddenly a huge debate around Cecil the Lion, and the fact that we as an agency were going to kill Cecil and get rid of him, and it wasn't true, which was the strangest thing. It was quite shocking for us. We were kind of very like, oh, we need to react to this, we need to kind of say this isn't true, but the Premier League, they're very used to dealing with the media, both positive and negative, so they were kind of quite cool and calm about it, so they were like, don't worry about it, we just don't say anything. And it was, when we were like, okay. Great. Fans obviously tweeted about it. So yeah, it was kind of, that wasn't the worst one. Unfortunately, Barry had passed away the same week, so it was all kind of quite negative. But after a few days, it kind of all died down a little bit. But what had happened is, on the 8th of February, the Premier League decided that they were going to launch the logo. And we were kind of surprised by this because we thought everything was going to be launching in the summer, because you can tell a really cohesive story about why we're changing and kind of really communicate what it means to everyone moving forward. But because of the trademarking process and the leak that it was being rebranded, they decided that it was going to be safer to launch the logo on its own and tell that story. So it launched, and this is where we got to with the Premier League symbol. So we simplified the lion, which was all about making sure it was going to work primarily in a digital space. So they do a lot of broadcast, and everyone's moving to watching football either on their phone or on their iPad. So it was about creating something that really worked well in a digital space, which was difficult, and also something that sat with all these kind of iconic brands and the world they lived in, not just sports brands. We developed a word mark, which was all about flexibility. So this allowed us to lock up the symbol in different ways, which was kind of the restricting element of what they had before. It was always portrait, which just meant it didn't work in lots of instances. So we had a lot of flexibility at how this could work, everything through hoardings to how it started to work on the ball. One of the biggest changes, which got a lot of reaction, was adopting a more vibrant palette. So we went for very bright colours that fitted more in the world of sports and less in the kind of corporate land that they'd been living in previously. We worked with Monotype to develop this typeface, which is Premier League Sans, and again, it's all about accessibility, working well across digital and broadcast, and being a lot more friendly, less shouty. Previously, everything had been in caps, so it is moving to being much more approachable. We also looked at the art direction, and it was all about telling those human stories about the people who really make it, and treating them with the same kind of respect as the stars, and making sure the quality of the photography and how we depict them with as much care as we did with the players. There was a need for some graphic elements as well, so part of they do huge events all around the world, and sometimes you need to put them across hoardings, and we created this pattern which was based on the lion's mane, and this was also designed to work well in like broadcast and digital spaces where we can animate. We decided not to animate the lion because we thought it might get a little bit cartoony and a bit Lion King as you'd seen before. Unfortunately, I can't share everything we've been working on them with because it's still we're still working in the process to launch everything for the new season, but these are just a few images that kind of give you an idea of how some of the graphic elements come together. So when it launched, there was a lot of positive and negative press, as with everything the Premier League seems to do. The Guardian kind of took it upon itself to launch a competition to design a better logo, because the sports writer didn't like it. There's some great ones in there. I particularly like the one with the Airbnb logo in it, because we also did the Airbnb logo. But it wasn't all kind of mocking and making jokes, fortunately. This is one of the favorite tweets we had in the studio, that Gary Lineker liking it meant a lot to all of us. Sing and play for England. So this is kind of just the beginning for the Premier League, and it's really about what they're going to do over the next couple of seasons and how they're going to drive kind of reappraisal of what they're about and change their image in the media. So hopefully the identity we developed and the way we're working with in the future is going to help them get to where they need to be. Thank you.